Chapter 4 of Umbrellas and Their History. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anne Cheng. Umbrellas and Their History by William Sangster. Chapter 4. The Story of the Parachute. In giving an account of the umbrella, it would not be right to omit mentioning another, and far from legitimate use in which it has been employed by notoriety hunting artistes. We allude to the parachute, and a short narration of its origin and progress may not be uninteresting to our readers. The parachute commonly in use is nothing more or less than a huge umbrella, presenting a surface of sufficient dimension to experience from the air a resistance equal to the weight of descent, in moving through the fluid at a velocity not exceeding that of the shock which a person can sustain without danger or injury. It is made of silk or cotton. To the outer edge cords are fastened, of about the same length as the diameter of the machine, 24 to 28 feet. A centre cord is attached to the apex, and meets the cords from the margin, acting in fact as the stick of the umbrella. The machine is thus kept expanded during descent. The car is fastened to the centre cord, and the whole attached to the balloon in such a manner that it may be readily and quickly detached, either by cutting a string or pulling a trigger. Consequently, in the East, where the umbrella has been from the earliest ages in familiar use, it appears to have been occasionally employed by vaulters, to enable them to jump safely from great heights. Father Loubert, in his curious account of Siam, relates that a person famous in that country for his dexterity used to divert the king and court by the extraordinary leaps he took, having two umbrellas with long slender handles fastened to his girdle. In 1783, Monsieur Le Normand demonstrated the utility of the parachute by lifting himself down from the windows of a high house at Lyons. His idea was that it might be made a sort of fire escape. Blanchard was the first person who constructed a parachute to act as a safety guard to the aeronaut in case of any accident. During an excursion he made from Lille in 1785, when he traversed without stopping a distance of 300 miles, he let down a parachute with a basket fastened to it, containing a dog. This he suffered to fall from a great height, and it reached the ground in safety. The first parachute descent from a balloon, however, was made by Jacques Garnerin on the 22nd of October 1797, in the park of Monceau. De Lalande, the celebrated astronomer, has furnished a detailed and highly interesting account of this foolish experiment. Garnerin resided in London during the short peace of 1802, and made two ascents with his balloon, in the second of which he let himself fall at an amazing height, with a parachute of 23 feet diameter. He started from an enclosure near North Audley Street, and descended after having been 7 or 8 minutes in the air. After cutting himself away, he floated over Marylebone and Somers Town, and fell in a field near St. Pancras Old Church. The oscillation was so great that he was thrown out of the parachute, and narrowly escaped death. He seemed a good deal frightened, and said that the peril was too great for endurance. One of the stays of the machine having given way, his danger was increased. The next person who tried this dangerous experiment was his niece, Eliza Garnerin, who descended several times in safety. Her parachute had a large orifice in the top, in order to check the oscillation, and this appears to have been tolerably successful. The next experimentalist was a person of the name of Cocking, who ended his days in a manner unworthy of his talents, through a series of lamentable mistakes. His parachute was constructed on the opposite principle, of a wedge-like form, and was intended to cleave through the air instead of offering a resistance to it. It has not yet been proved that the principle was wrong, but the defect lay in the weakness of the materials employed in the formation of the parachute. On the 29th of July, 1837, Mr. Cocking ascended in his new parachute, attached to the great Nassau balloon. Mr. Cocking liberated himself from the balloon. The parachute collapsed and fell, at a frightful rate, into a field near Lille, where poor Cocking was found with an awful wound on his right temple. He never spoke, but died almost immediately afterwards. It is much to be regretted that the descent was ever allowed to take place. The aeronauts themselves were for some time in a state of imminent peril. Immediately the parachute was cut away, the balloon ascended with frightful velocity, owing to the ascending power it necessarily gained by being freed from a weight of nearly 500 pounds, and had it not been that its occupants applied their mouths to the air bags previously provided, they must have been suffocated by the escaping gas. When the reaction took place, the balloon had lost its buoyancy, and fell, rather than descended, to the ground. Mr. Hampton was the next person who attempted the experiment, and made 3 descents in a parachute in succession without injury. Undeterred by the awful fate of his predecessor, this gentleman determined on making a parachute descent which should prove the correctness of the theory, and the Montpellier Gardens at Cheltenham were selected as the scene of the exploit. Owing to the censure which was attached to the proprietors of the Vauxhall Gardens for permitting Cocking's ascent, the owners of the gardens at Cheltenham would not suffer the experiment to be made, and Mr. Hampton was obliged to have recourse to stratagem. As he was permitted to display his parachute in the manner he intended to use it, the idea suddenly flashed across his mind that he could carry out his long-nursed wishes. He suddenly cut the rope which kept him down, and went off, to the astonishment of the spectators, the last cheering sound that reached him being, "He will be killed to a dead certainty." After attaining an altitude of nearly 2 miles, Mr. Hampton proceeded to cut the rope that held him attached to the balloon. He paused for a second or two, as he remembered that it would soon be life or death with him, but at length drew his knife across the rope. The first feelings he experienced were both unpleasant and alarming. His eyes and the top of his head appeared to be forced upwards, but this passed off in a few seconds, and his feelings subsequently became pleasant rather than disagreeable. So steady and slow was the descent that the parachute appeared to be stationary. Mr. Hampton remembered that a bag of ballast was fastened beneath the car. He stooped over and upset the sand. He also noted by his watch the time he occupied in descending. The earth seemed coming up to him rapidly. The parachute indicated its approach to terra firma by a slight oscillation, and he presently struck the ground in the centre of a field, where he was first welcomed by a sheep, which stared at this visitor from the clouds in utter amazement. Mr. Hampton repeated the experiment twice in London, though on both occasions with considerable danger to himself, the first time falling on a tree in Kensington Gardens, the second on a house, which threw him out of the basket. After this experiment there was a lull in the parachute folly until some 20 years ago, when Madame Poitevin startled the metropolis from its propriety by her perilous escapes both in life and limb. Although considerable ingenuity was displayed in the plan of expanding the parachute by the sudden discharge of gas from the balloon, still the very fact of a woman being exposed to such danger by her husband will, we trust, hereafter prevent Englishmen from countenancing such an exhibition by their presence. Chapter 4